Hi, welcome to the show. My name is Don Walchuk, and with me today is Geoff Scott from Tri-Cities Community Television Society, and back with me again is Sid Chaltan of Access TV Community Television, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So today I wanted to Sid was on the show a while back, and we were talking about community television, and I wanted to carry forth that theme of a plan for the future of community television. And I thought, since you guys have been working in community television so long, who best to ask about what community television is than you two? So maybe just give me a little bit of a history. Geoff, why don't you talk about your history in community television?
Sure. My personal history, I got involved in community TV shortly after high school, way back in the early 80s. And at that time, I would call it the glory days of community TV. There were offices in every community where volunteers, walked in and found staff who were there to train you. Not to the extent of BCIT, but they would, give you the basics and then send you off with gear to go cover community events, promote the community. In my area, it was kits, so we did, kite festivals and tea parties and all that kind of good stuff. And then shortly after, I went on to work in the industry. And about that time, as I started working in the industry, community TV seemed to crumble and disappear with deregulation.
Right.
And
that's about the time when I met you.
I think it was about that time.
1997, around that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got involved with ICTV, as you know, and was eventually their board chair for a while.
Right.
And I live out in the Tri-Cities, so eventually decided that to continue to help grow community TV, the best thing for me to do was to start it in my own community as well. So thus Tri-Cities Community Television was formed.
How about you, Sid? How did you get involved in community television?
I got involved because some people that were producing a Chinese-Canadian themed community television asked me to come in and host and introduce them to the community. At that time, I was co-publisher of the Chinese-Canadian Bulletin, and I thought it would be great. It was great for cross-promotion purposes, so I did that. And when I got into it, I realized the potential of community television just for moving ahead agendas and for getting video done at that time. If you remember, this was just post-Expo 1986, and video equipment was not as plentiful. I remember we're using sort of the big cameras with the umbilical cord to a recorder and all that, and those were hard to get your hands on. So I realized, wow, here's an opportunity where I can promote the community, promote my business, promote events that we had that I was doing stories on at the paper and get them onto television. It was almost early cross-platform. And from then on, I've just been in it. It's been, it's hard to believe, it's almost been 30 years since I've been involved with community television, and lately we've been coming in, and I produced a regular show since 1994. So it just goes on, and it just seems to be part of life. But I just realized the possibilities for community organizing and using media as an organizing tool.
So when we talk about community television, for those that outside there, what are we talking about exactly? What is community television to you?
To me?
Yeah.
What it was when I came in, it was what I first got was community offices all over the Lower Mainland. I recall there were probably 14 or 16 community offices. There were 4 in Vancouver alone, and it was the getting together of people. See, I see you and Geoff and I as media. Individually, we're a medium. You live your life and you look at life the way it is, and you kind of, if you want to call it, channel it, or you're a medium for whatever that reflection is. And so we are all a medium. We're the prime medium for storytelling. We're the prime medium for information. So you have your information, you storytell. Together, we are media, and that's the way I kind of consider how we do things. And I don't know if that makes sense to you. So I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm a medium. When I use community television and we get together in a studio and all this stuff, we're producing media, collective stories.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was thinking of is that there's a policy about community television, how television is supposed to operate, and there's various different ideas of how that should function. What are some of your insights about community television?
Well, when I talk to people who don't understand what community TV is, I kind of draw the analogy that we're basically a socially responsible film school. You know, we don't teach you you don't get a diploma,
Right.
but we teach you the basics, and then you take the skills that we've given you, and you use them, and instead of charging you $30,000 to come to our school, we charge you $30 to be a member. And then we give you feedback on the programming that you produce, and hopefully the programming continues to get better and your skills get better. And quite often those, they eventually reach a high enough level, either go on to work in the industry or may go to school or to further their education. So it's basically a win-win for everybody. It's an opportunity that afforded to the community to promote various events and community groups, and it's an opportunity afforded to the volunteers themselves for developing skills, and not only production skills, but skills of working as a team, all those other good things that come out of working.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things I wanted to talk to is it's a regulated policy. Like cable companies have to carry access community television. Can you explain a little bit about how that works, Sid? Like how?
Well, what happens, community television is one of the three elements of the Canadian broadcasting system. The first element would be called public broadcasting, which would include CBC, Radio Canada, NBC, Knowledge Network, and all the other publicly funded broadcasters. And then there's private broadcasting, which is pretty much everything else. That's the second element. The third element is community television, which is also publicly funded by way of a community channel levy. And that levy is to do what Geoff suggested, training. It's to promote stories that are complementary to the private broadcaster and public broadcaster. There's it's smaller stories in the community, things that are going on in the community. And most of all, it's supposed to be there to build communities. It's supposed to help tell the story of what communities want and the kind of media that they would never otherwise get from the private broadcaster or the public broadcaster, because it doesn't have the numbers. And community television is not about big eyeballs on the screen and stuff like that. It's about the community getting the training and telling their stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's different definitions for sure. Like there's so much, you're supposed to have so much local coverage and so much Canadian coverage. But I think one of the things I wanted to talk about is how that policy is always changing. Like we've seen, we were talking about the late 90s when the policy drastically changed, where cable companies were no longer required to carry access community television. And when that happened, they started shutting down offices, and well, that's basically how ICTV came about. We had to write to the CRTC and complain that we wanted to keep community television going, and we formed a cooperative. We formed ICTV so we could keep our programming going, but then Rogers started closing down offices, and then they started canceling our shows, and then it was taken over by Shaw, and then again we lost more of our programming when Shaw took over. So can you sort of explain what's happening? Like what is the process of making a complaint to the CRTC and trying to change those policies?
There's a very well-known complaint process. If you go to CRTC, all you have to do is do a quick search and just complaint process, and it's very Well, I don't have it offhand, but the CRTC website is crtc.gc.ca, and just do a search for complaint process, and it's all there. And it's actually really quite simple. At least I found out. But then that may be a result of the fact that I've been engaged in that process. I think that in terms of how to engage the complaint process, I'm not quite sure now what the CRTC will do, because they're planning to have a community media public process sometime this year or early next year. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm coming on to talk about community television. I think the community should get engaged in community television, because there is a lot of public money at stake here. Almost $120 million across Canada of public money goes to cable companies to produce community television. And
well, that's the question I'd like to ask. Like, how is that money regulated? Like, who gets that money?
the cable companies.
And do any of the access groups get any of that money?
I don't think they do in Vancouver that I know of, and I can only speak about Shaw. There are two other cable providers. There's TELUS and Novus, and I'm not certain what they're doing. I can say that I've been a volunteer with Rogers and then Shaw, not exactly Shaw, but through Access Community Television. I maybe received a total of $20-some-odd for parking because I refused to pay the parking meter for the mobile, and that's about it. No, they're very stingy along that line, along money going to access producers who bear the brunt of the download that happened in 1997 with the CRTC regulations that said that cable companies could run the channel any way they wanted, and they could even promote themselves and promote their services. A lot of that has changed in the last 10 or 15 years, and we're kind of back in terms of the access to the broadcasting at Shaw, but we are missing 15 or 16 community offices. We're missing, you remember when they had a studio in Vancouver, they had a studio in Burnaby, they had other studios. Geoff will be able to give you of what community television used to be before that disastrous policy change 15 years ago, and we've been trying to catch up for the past 15 years. And I have to admit, like Shaw's been doing, relatively speaking, a pretty good job because they're actually doing training. And Geoff can probably tell you about some of the stuff they're working with and what TELUS is doing in assisting Geoff to get training and all that going on.
Well, so let's talk about that, Geoff. Like, how does Tri-Cities work?
Well, we go back a step and talk about the complaints process and just say that's not a path that we've really taken, so I couldn't talk too much about that. Okay. But initially, when the cable companies, being Shaw at the time, started closing down the community offices, I was actually an employee with Shaw at the time.
Right.
And I was not comfortable with what was happening, and I found my first opportunity to leave and work elsewhere in the media business. And I was very disappointed in what happened. But coming around full circle to what we're doing today in the Tri-Cities, and I've come to realize it's actually a good thing, and that what we're trying to rebuild now is community TV the way it should have been done the first time.
Right.
I'm a big believer in community media, and I think the CRTC was right to impose community television, but I think they went around doing it the wrong way. And the cable companies never should have been in charge of operating it. They should have been providing the platform and providing assistance, but the communities are the ones that should be driving it themselves. They should be in charge, they should be deciding what programming they want to do, and delivering it to the cable companies who then play it. And that's kind of where we're aiming at now. When I first went to my local city councils and said, well, we're looking for money for community television, I was pretty much laughed out of council. I was told that this is something the cable companies are supposed to pay for, and if they're not going to pay for it, there's no way in hell the cities are going to pay for it. So that was a bit of a setback. We started producing programming anyways, and we got involved with a number of community groups. And to date, we have over 12 community groups that invest $500 a year as members.